At the time of this recording, I've been working full-time as a sound designer and a producer for 10 years. I've learned a lot along the way. I've done a lot of things the right way, but I've also made a lot of mistakes. And if I could go back and talk to myself just as I was starting this journey, here are the 10 pieces of advice I would share. Number 1, first and foremost, release your music. When it comes to producing, quantity leads to quality. For so many years, I just felt like my music had to be perfect before I could put it out there. But this is not true. And to be honest, the music that I was making years ago was plenty good enough for me to put out there in the world and share with everyone. I genuinely feel like I would be years ahead of where I am now if I started releasing my music more consistently and earlier. Just like producing, finishing and releasing music properly takes practice. And if you never finish a track and never release any music, then you never get that practice. And it's always going to be difficult, and it's always going to feel like that mountain in the distance you have to climb. Think of your releases less like a total representation of who you are as a musician and producer, and more like a journal entry of who you were at that time. A little snapshot of your skills, your influences, what kind of music you were making, what you like to listen to. When you start to think of it less as a representative of you, who you are and who you always will be, and more of a journal entry or a snapshot, it makes it easier to put this music out there in the world, knowing that the next release is going to be better, the next release after that's going to be better, and you're going to continue to grow. Piece of advice number 2, you have to make a lot of bad music in order to make good music. So do not get discouraged if you feel like you're making bad music. Be okay with being bad. And just keep in mind that you're still better than you were yesterday, even if it doesn't feel like it. If you let the pressure of making good music get in the way of being artistic and exploring, then you might find yourself kind of blocked up and feeling like, oh, well, this has to be good. And if it's not good, then that's a problem. When the reality is, everyone makes bad music. Making lots of bad music leads directly to making lots of good music. I often like to keep in mind the mythology of the Greek muses. In ancient Greece, they believed the muses were the source of all artistic inspiration, not the artists themselves. The artists were simply a conduit for the muses to work through them. If they made some amazing piece of art, well, it wasn't really them, it was the muses. If they made something bad, then the muses just didn't come that day. I often think about this when I'm making bad music. I don't take it so personally. I just think, well, the muses didn't come. Or if I make something amazing, sure, I'm going to let myself feel pretty good about that. But it also kind of is nice to keep this in mind and think like, well, inspiration just happened to strike today, whether that is from the ether, from the muses, or from myself. Either way, some days you make bad music, some days you make good music. It's the yin and yang of the production process. Number 3, it's not about the equipment you use. I know I'm a bit of a hypocrite with this one. My studio is full of fun gear and good speakers, great equipment. What can I say? I like toys. But this has held me back in the past big time. For a long time, I kept thinking, oh, if I just get this one thing or this one plugin or this one little piece of gear, then I'll be able to make good music. When the reality is that's absolutely not the case. People have made absolutely insane albums, tracks with the absolute most minimal of tools. One example would be the Gorillaz 2010 album The Fall, which was made entirely on an iPad. And Bon Iver's album For Emma Forever Ago was recorded in a remote cabin with just an old MacBook Pro and Pro Tools LE. So you don't need amazing equipment to make amazing music. What's more important is what you bring to the production process. The 4th piece of advice that I would give myself is that there is a one-to-one relationship between time spent making music and how much better you get at it. Even though it might not seem like it at times, like sometimes it might seem like you're putting all this effort into the production process and you're trying so hard and you're just not getting anywhere. Oftentimes, the growth moves on a scale that's too slow for us to actively perceive. And one day, you might just wake up and all of a sudden, you're better. And it feels like that, but that's not really what was happening the entire time you were getting better. It's just finally one day you're able to perceive that all this time spent was you getting better and you're able to do things that you didn't think you could do before. Because of this, it's very important that you make time to make music. You won't get better if you don't at least try. The best advice I can give any producer is to make a daily schedule and stick to it. And in that schedule, bake in some time every day to get in the DAW and make a little bit of music. Even if you don't feel like it, get in there and do some freeform sound design, play around with something that you just know is not going to go anywhere. All of this is valuable time spent, because the time you spend making music is time spent getting better. Piece of advice number 5, this is one that I fell into really hard for a lot of years. Do not confuse watching tutorials with making progress. It's really easy to feel like you're actually doing something while you're watching a tutorial, when in the reality is you're just procrastinating. I did this for a lot of years, where I would just sit and watch tutorials, but I would not actively take what I was learning and apply it immediately to the music I was making. I would just sit and watch and hope that I would absorb it like a sponge. I've heard this being called stockpiling knowledge. And the reality is, learning by doing is infinitely more valuable than stockpiling knowledge. When you have a question, seek the knowledge. Otherwise, just do the thing. Number 6 is kind of a funny one, but it's something that I thought for a while I shouldn't do. And that is, it's okay to use presets. It's fine to use presets. If you're a producer and if your goal is to write music, let the sound designers make the presets. You can take them and use them to make music. So my career followed the trajectory of, first I was a sound designer, then I was a producer. So for a long time, I felt like, I couldn't use presets. If I call myself a sound designer, then using somebody else's presets felt very ingenuine to me. And while that may have helped me to become better as a sound designer, because I would just make everything from scratch, it did not help me on my journey as a producer. It did not help me to write songs quickly. The presets are there for you to use. What you do with them is where you get to show how creative you are. Number 7. Now, this is something that a lot of my students talk to me about. And I understand, because it's something that I was concerned about for a lot of years when I was a younger producer. And it involves your sound, that identifiable fingerprint that the listener immediately identifies with you and your art and your production style. There are some artists out there who are just so identifiable because they have just that sound and you know it's them. Skrillex is one of them. Son Holo, Excision, Noisia. Can you tell I'm a bass music producer? These are all the artists that I know and love and think have this very identifiable characteristic to their sound. But a lot of people are concerned about finding their sound. And if I could go back and talk to myself, I would just say, do not stress over this. Inevitably, your sound will develop over time. Even if you are not actively trying to, it's going to happen. The tools you use, how you use them, the way you arrange the pieces of music, the way you process everything, you'll eventually find paths that work for you. And you'll keep doing those things over and over again. And that will leave a sonic mark on the music that will then be identified as a piece of music made by you. So don't worry about developing a sound. It's going to happen whether you try or not. Number 8, this is a big one for me and something that I have to remind myself all the time now. Beat block happens. Writer's block, right? When you just feel like you can't write anything and nothing you do is good. Bad days in the studio happen. Bad weeks in the studio happen. This does not mean you're a bad producer. This is natural. And the most important way to deal with this is to develop strategies to get past it, break through it, or at least just not go crazy while you're in the beat block phase. For me, the most effective things I do when I'm experiencing beat block are I'll take a break from producing. Now, I'm usually in the studio almost every day, so for me it might just be 2 or 3 days off, maybe even just 1. Sometimes I'll take a week off, but just time away from the DAW, time away from making music can be very refreshing. One of my favorite books is Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And in this book, she talks about the need to refill your creative well. And in that, what she's talking about is actively seeking activities that inspire and invigorate your creative energy. If you're not finding the studio invigorating creatively, time to step away. Go on a hike, spend time with friends, go play some sports, go on a walk by the beach, take a trip somewhere for the weekend. Just get out of the studio and go do something that is fun, relaxing, and ends up refilling your creative well. Something else that helps me get past this is to actively try to make bad music. This has worked really well in the past. If I can't make good music, well, I'm just going to make bad music, and I'm going to make it so bad, and it's going to be so silly and so stupid. And sometimes just the process of trying to make the worst piece of crap music that you can possibly create is enough to push you past the beat block. I don't know. It works. It's worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you. Number 9, less is often more. Learn to do more with less. I'm of course speaking about this in the, equipment mindset like we talked about earlier, but I'm also speaking about it from a songwriting and compositional mindset. When you're earlier on in your production career, it's very easy to fall into the idea that in order to make a good piece of music, you gotta really flex. You gotta put everything in the music. It's gotta be complex. It's gotta have a ton of layers. It's gotta be a lot going on. But if you actually listen to a lot of the music that is very popular out there, usually the music that really takes off is so simple. What this means is creating something that is so effective that it doesn't need to be layered and complicated. It's just simple, effective. It does what it does. The last piece of advice that I would give myself is that not all advice is good advice. Learn to filter what resonates with you. What works for someone else might not work for you, and you should trust your instincts. Trust that what you are writing will connect with someone like you. Now, this doesn't mean to ignore all advice, right? A lot of advice is great advice. If you can find those trusted sources, trusted teachers, friends who are going to give you really good feedback, YouTube channels and courses that are going to help you to advance, those are sources to be trusted. But even then, if you feel like you're doing the right thing in your music, the thing that resonates with you, trust your instinct. Go with it. Chances are there's a large group of people out there that would feel the same way as you. There it is. That is the top 10 pieces of advice that I would give myself if I could go back 10 years and talk to younger John as I'm just starting this journey. This is, of course, one of those situations where hindsight is 20/20. So hopefully you can learn from my experiences, you can learn from my advice, apply it to your own life, and avoid some of these same pitfalls that I may have fallen into over the years. End of the day, I think all of this will help you to become a better producer more quickly.